Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, Preparing Your Business for Storm Season Part 1, Your Physical Premises. My name is Caitlin Maltzberg from CCIQ and I'm your facilitator for today. Joining us today is Travis Bell, SES Operations, Queensland Fire and Emergency Services. Queensland is Australia's greatest state in which to live, but at times nature unleashes its fury on the Sunshine State and the ramifications for business, community and our economy can be devastating. From our research following the 2011 floods, Cyclone Yasi and Cyclone Oswald, we know the impacts for business can be severe. To help businesses prepare for this year's storm season, CCIQ has partnered with the Queensland Government, the Department of Infrastructure, local government and planning to Get Ready Queensland to put together a 5-part webinar series to help you make sure your business can mitigate your risks and prepare for storm season. This is the first webinar in this series. First, some tips to get the most from today's session. We will be online for about 30 minutes and following the main presentation, there will be an opportunity for questions and answers. Please send through your questions for Travis at any stage by using the text box on screen. Following the session, we will email all participants a copy of the presentation, a link, and additional supporting information, so please check your inboxes later today. So now I'll hand over to Travis, who will help you prepare your business for storm season.
Well, thanks, Caitlin. I'm Travis Bell from the Queensland State Emergency Service. I'm one of the 6,000 SES volunteers around Queensland. And we're part of the Queensland Fire Emergency Services. And we work closely too with local councils and local disaster management groups. Now, if you haven't already, the chances are that you'll be seeing SES volunteers on the TV news this summer cleaning up somewhere in Queensland after cyclones, floods, or big storm events. SES volunteers are community-minded people from all walks of life, working together with their local community with an ethos of self-help and mutual assistance. It's that kind of approach that we see every summer in Queensland. People helping each other to get through tough and difficult situations. But responding to natural disasters and severe weather is only part of what the SES does. We help communities get prepared as well. And today, we're going to discuss a few of the things that your business can do to get prepared for this summer storm season. Let's start by talking about PPRR. Prevent, Prepare, Respond, and Recover. You may have heard someone talk about it before. These are the 4 elements of resilience. It's not enough just to think about how you'll respond to a situation. You need to think about and plan for all 4 steps if you want to be better prepared and more resilient when it comes to facing things like natural disasters or severe storms. And when it comes to responding, it's important to understand too that the focus of what SES volunteers do in storm season is on fixing and helping domestic premises, people's homes, rather than businesses and commercial premises. But the good news is that when it comes to helping you get prepared at home or at business, there's plenty that you can do right now. And the more that you've done to prevent and prepare, the better you'll be able to respond and recover should your business be impacted by severe weather this summer storm season. The first step is understanding the risks that apply to your business. Now, Queensland is a great place to live and an even better place to do business. It's also a very big place, and the challenges that face Western communities in Queensland are often very different to those faced by communities along the coast. Every local community faces its own set of risks when it comes to weather and summer storms. So the first step is getting to know what the risks are in your community. Here, knowing the local history is really important. Questions like, where has it flooded before? Which of your local creeks rise quickly after some heavy rain? Are there roads that always seem to go underwater when there's a storm? Now, this is especially important if you're new to an area. Get talking to your neighbours, nearby tenants, your customers even. and make sure that your neighbours and tenants nearby have your contact details and you have theirs so that you can keep each other informed this storm season. Now, your local council is going to be very useful as well here. You might like to talk to them to see what resources they have available when it comes to things like flood mapping. And when you're looking at your risk of flood, don't only think about your physical premises. Think also about getting to and from them. Access. How are your suppliers, your employees, and your customers going to get to your business or get away from your business if needs be in a severe storm? Talking about flood risk, there are a few kinds of flooding we can talk about too. The first is what we call slow onset flooding. This happens when the big inland rivers in places like Western Queensland become filled and flood the wide plains for miles and miles. It literally looks like there's nothing but water stretching across the horizon when it happens. This kind of flooding happens a lot more slowly than other kinds of flooding. Unfortunately, it usually lasts for a lot longer as well, and it isolates communities and towns for weeks at a time. Now, because it happens slower, it can give people time to prepare, both their homes and their businesses, and it can even give some people the opportunity to evacuate to safer ground. The chances are too that if you live or work in one of these communities, there are going to be plenty of people around who can tell you what happens if you've never experienced it before. Unfortunately though, when the waters finally do recede, this kind of flooding leaves a lot of damage to transport and communications infrastructure, and these can take a long time to fix. The second kind of flooding is quick onset flooding. Now, this happens where creeks and rivers that flow down from mountain ranges that sit above many of our coastal cities run into the towns and collect a lot of rain over a few days. Because they run through these bigger towns and cities, they usually and often can bring flooding right into the heart of the city. They can shut down the entire CBD. Many people will remember, of course, what happened in Brisbane in both the 78 floods and our more recent event. And even if your business isn't directly affected by this kind of flooding, when your business district is shut down for a week or so, think about the kind of damage that does to business generally. It might impact the way your customers get to you. It might impact your supply chains. It might make it hard when transport infrastructure or highways, for example, are flooded for your employees to get to work. And this can be where flood mapping from your local council can be a really useful resource in understanding your risk. This kind of flooding, the quick onset flooding, is the kind that has probably happened many times over the years, particularly during big rain events or ex-tropical cyclones. Again, talking to your neighbours and people in your community will be good clues. Brings me to the third and most dangerous kind of flooding that we see every storm season, flash flooding. It's the most unpredictable, the fastest, and unfortunately the most deadly. Flash flooding can cause life-threatening situations in literally minutes. It's what happens when intense thunderstorms dump a massive amount of rain on a relatively small area. The rain overwhelms the area's ability for the water to drain away properly, and the water rises literally in minutes. It can trap people in buildings. It can wash people and vehicles away too, in sometimes tragic circumstances. Once again, talking to neighbours, to locals, if you've never experienced it before or if you're new to the area, looking at flood mapping, these are going to give you a good idea of where water and stormwater in particular flows near your premises. And of course, while we're talking about flooding of any kind, let's remind ourselves too that if it's flooded, forget it. More than half of flood-related deaths come from people driving through floodwater. Now, this is important for your business as well because many businesses involve vehicles. You might have drivers, you might have people in company cars. Make sure everybody understands the dangers of floodwaters and that if it's flooded, forget it. Understanding your business's risk from flooding includes, as I said, not only your immediate premises, but also the way in and out of your building. So you really need to look at the broader context when it comes to flooding and to see what those flood mapping shows for you and your area. If you live or work in southeast Queensland, you'll probably be familiar with our summer thunderstorms. They can be spectacular to watch, offer some really great light shows, and often they're a really welcome relief from the afternoon's heat and humidity. Right now, we are bang in the middle of our storm season. A severe storm is one which has hail of over 2 centimetres in diameter, wind gusts of over 90 kilometres per hour, or is considered likely to cause flash flooding, or even a tornado. And yes, Queensland can and sometimes does see tornadoes, in particular around the plains near Oakey. You might also hear on occasion the phrase supercells. Now these are very severe thunderstorms that cause some very significant damage. Severe storms can develop very quickly, but the good news is the Weather Bureau does a really good job in predicting them, monitoring them when they are occurring, and issuing warnings for what's going to happen. Many people will be familiar with the Bureau of Meteorology's weather radars. There are radars all over Australia and up and down the coast. They're available free of charge and online, so you can literally watch a storm in pretty close to real time as it's moving across your area. You'll probably be aware too that ABC Local Radio does a really good job in broadcasting storm warnings and keeping the community informed. Severe storms are dangerous because a storm that packs 90 kilometres per hour winds or higher can quite easily lift loose objects that are left lying around and send them flying into your premises. Debris from buildings that have been damaged then goes flying as well down the street, and it creates something of a chain reaction of building damage. Hail, particularly with strong wind behind it, can punch right through windows, walls, and skylights in particular. It can also cause a lot of damage to vehicles and to people. Rain from severe storms not only can bring that flash flooding we spoke about earlier, but when your roof has sustained a bit of damage from flying objects or debris, it really opens your whole building up to that kind of flood damage inside your building. Once water gets inside your roof, you're almost certain to have problems with your electricals. During the storm season, it's not unusual either for there to be severe storms, one after the other, all the way through an afternoon into the evening. And so if your building has sustained a little bit of damage early on, or even worse, if it wasn't in a good state to start with, it means that more damage can be done as the day progresses from one storm after the next. Keep in mind too that even if your premises haven't been particularly badly damaged or the storm didn't seem too bad where you are, it's not at all unusual for there to be pockets of more significant damage. While only streets away, life goes on as normal. So even without major building damage to your building or your business premises, some storms can actually cause quite a bit of disruption. In Brisbane in particular, they have a habit of passing over in the late afternoon, close to when people are knocking off or picking up kids from school. The storms disrupt public transport, they cause traffic gridlock, and of course we all know that electricity supplies can easily be disrupted too after storms for hours at a time. So it's not just the damage that storms can cause, it's that disruption as well that you need to account for. At home, just as at work, there are some practical things that you can do to prepare. Now, depending on how you do business, some of these things may not be up to you alone. You may need to talk to landlords, centre managers, other tenants nearby, or your neighbours. Everybody shares an interest in each other's business being well prepared and resilient. It pays to know your neighbours, as I said before. These are the people that you'll need to rely on if the worst ever happens. You'll be giving them a hand, and they'll be giving you a hand to clean up. The best place to start, though, is by looking at good property maintenance going into storm season. Buildings and grounds that are in good repair going into a storm season will probably fare better than those that aren't. I'm talking about things like leaks in a roof, cracked windows, blocked gutters and clogged drains. These are the things that are going to make it harder for your business premises to withstand a severe storm. Check signs, awnings. Are these things still well secured? Are there things out the back of your business that could blow away in a gusty storm and affect your neighbours? Think about your outdoor displays or even tables and chairs. Are they properly secured when you're closed and a storm comes through on a weekend, for example? Trees are another big potential problem for many as well. Look for overhanging branches over power lines. And if they do need to be trimmed back, it sometimes helps to call a professional to take care of them. And again, getting back to the flooding issue, if your business is in an area where flooding has occurred before, longer term there might be some design changes that you can consider, things like having hard floor coverings, repositioning electrical outlets higher up on walls, and having air conditioners elevated off the ground. Well, that's the outside taken care of, but think about getting prepared inside your business. Take a serious look at your evacuation plan. The chances are you've got an evacuation plan and it might deal with things like fire, but make sure it factors in severe weather. Ask questions like, does everyone in your workplace know who is in charge and what they're expected to do during severe storms? What happens in your business if the power goes out? What happens if hail blows windows in or there's flash flooding in the grounds? Are you sure everyone knows where the water and gas can be turned off if they needed to? Now, the SES encourages homeowners to have an emergency kit at home. Business should have one too. Now, you'll already have a fully stocked first aid kit, so to this you might want to think about adding things like torches and a battery-powered radio, just for starters. And of course, you'll want to be keeping that high and dry, which brings me to the issue of where you keep stuff at your business. Now, depending on your business and what you do, it's worth considering where you keep things, particularly like chemicals and dangerous liquids. If you are in an area where stormwater or flooding has occurred, storing these kind of things where they won't leach into stormwater helps everyone, because storm and floodwater almost always is contaminated with enough nasty and horrible things to begin with. A few years ago, I was up in Mackay after a flood as part of an SES task force, helping families clean up. I saw the unfortunate result of what happens to people when their files and documents have been sitting floating in a cabinet of mud, muck and stormwater for a week at a time. The documents are pretty much unsalvageable. So storing your important documents off-site and electronically can be a good solution. If you do a lot of work with paper files, think about how and where you keep them. You know those cardboard archive boxes? They're cheap and they're convenient, but if they get wet, they offer no protection to what's inside. There may be some alternatives you might like to consider, like plastic crates that have fitted lids. Can't guarantee that they'll protect everything, but they'll fare a lot better than those cardboard archive boxes. When severe weather does affect a community, it's not unusual for equipment like ladders, generators, pumps and washdown gear to be snapped up really quickly from hardware and hire companies. You can't necessarily rely on it being available when you need it. Again, depending on your business, it might be worth considering investing in these things so that you'd be able to quickly clean up or keep your doors open in the event of severe weather. It's not unusual either for repairers and tradespeople to be kept busy for months afterward, repairing damage after a severe storm, like the hailstorm that affected Brisbane last year. It pays to have your premises in good condition going into a storm season. Little problems, those leaky roofs, broken windows, turn into pretty major problems when they've got 100 km/h winds affecting them. And if you do suffer building damage from severe weather, you'll also fare better by having some gear and some materials to make repairs on site. I'm talking about things like tarps and plastic sheeting, some rope, good quality tape, and a set of tools like hammers and pliers. Now, depending on your situation, you might even consider plywood sheeting that could cover smashed windows in an emergency. because it's not just the wind and rain that you're going to want to keep out if a storm blows windows and doors in. And of course, you'll want your insurance up to date as well. And you'll be wanting to keep those policy details very handy. Your insurance company will be a good source of advice if the worst happens. It's a good idea to be familiar with what they'll need or want from you if you have to make a claim. A lot of time there are warnings about severe weather on its way. As I said, the Bureau of Meteorology monitors weather all over Queensland, and that includes, by the way, the heights of nearby creeks and rivers. The Bureau issues storm and flood warnings that are routinely broadcast not only over the internet but also by the ABC local radio in particular. The most dangerous situations are prefixed by something called the Standard Emergency Warning Signal. It's a really noticeable siren, special siren wail that will get everyone's attention really quickly. It's only ever used for the most dangerous and life-threatening situations, and it's really hard to miss. You'll know it when you hear it, and if you hear it, you really should listen to the message that comes after it as if your life depended on it, because the chances are that it very well may. In addition to all this, some local councils, like Brisbane and Moreton Bay, offer residents free SMS and email warnings. This is something you might want to check with your local council to see what's on offer. But severe weather usually doesn't come out of nowhere. Bad weather will often be forecast in the days leading up to it. Not always, but usually. So to be properly prepared, you'll want to keep an ear out for the weather forecast throughout storm season. This will give you a heads up when bad weather needs to be factored in to what your business is doing for the next week or so. Your primary obligation, and no doubt your primary concern, is always going to be to make sure that your people, your customers, your employees are safe. You might want to designate someone in your team to monitor for storm warnings during the day and keep everyone informed. Depending on your workplace, when severe weather approaches, some simple things might be letting people go to lunch a little bit earlier than usual, or giving people time to move their cars under cover. You'll want to let people who are working outside know too, so that they can get indoors. It could mean closing your business early, or it might even mean staying open later to give everyone there somewhere safe to be until the storm passes. Delaying travel is usually a better idea than trying to beat a storm home. If you've got outside displays, you'll want to bring them indoors, and of course any vehicles, trucks or that sort of equipment, you'll want to move them away from trees and overhead power lines. When a storm is approaching is not the time to try to fix things. You don't want to be up on a ladder then. It's too late. It's time to get yourself, your team and your gear inside and secured. Now, a word now about sandbags. A lot of people have seen them used quite successfully, and if you think stormwater or flash flooding may impact your business, and if you have some notice, you might be able to use sandbags together with plastic sheeting. Sandbags work best when they are used to divert running water rather than holding sitting water back. And they can offer some help when used to plug up the gaps under doors and windows of your business as well. Importantly, you need sandbags to be used in combination with plastic sheeting or waterproof tarp. The sandbags weigh down the plastic sheeting to make things watertight. Working with sandbags is hard work. It takes quite a few people, it takes quite a bit of time, it takes, you'll actually have to have the things like hessian bags, sand and plastic sheeting ready to go on site as well. So it's not something that you can do at the last minute. And remember too that once sandbags are in place, it's usually going to limit access to your building, which may make it difficult to carry on business throughout the rest of the day. Any old sandbags you've got lying around from last year's season, don't expect them to be any good again this year because they tend to break down and fall apart. During storm season, some local councils even provide sandbags for collection. They might be filled, or you might have to go and fill them up yourself at various locations near you. This is something you're going to want to check with your local council just to see what they have available. I've also included at the end of this presentation a really great tutorial on YouTube from the SES about how to use and place sandbags. Now, during a severe weather event, it's important to stay aware of what's going on around you. Local radio is pretty useful here, particularly your local ABC, and if the power goes out, that battery-powered radio is going to come in handy. Again, depending upon your business, if the power does go out, you'll have to make a call whether it's practical and safe to continue operations. And again, you'll be wanting to consider everyone's safety about where they are, and this is where your evacuation plan might come in handy and might need to be activated. After a storm has passed, once again, the safety of the people near you is going to be your first priority. Once it's safe to do so, go outside, make sure you're wearing solid footwear and whatever PPE is appropriate, and check over the property for damage. You're going to be looking for things like fallen power lines, broken glass, slippery surfaces even. I mean, it's quite amazing. Leaves fallen from a tree after a hailstorm make cement surfaces really quite slippery and dangerous. And of course, storm and flood water is a real hazard. If it's flooded, forget it, on foot or in a car, and slips and falls can happen really quite easily. You'd be amazed it only takes a few inches of running water to knock an adult over. And remember too that storm water is quite often contaminated with sewage or nasty chemicals or who knows what. Now, if you do find damage to your business premises, this is something you'll be wanting to call your insurance company about for advice right away. And of course, if your business has been damaged, be aware that chances are that other things in your other places in your community, your employees' homes, for example, might also have suffered damage too. And be mindful and understanding that they're going to want to obviously attend to family and to their own situation. So look, in summary, there are top 5 things that you can do to be prepared. The first is, as I mentioned, make sure your premises are well maintained going into storm season. Have your insurance up to date and have your policy and contact details for your insurer very handy. Inform yourself about the local risks that apply to your business. Prepare your premises with evacuation plans. Have some of those repair materials, tarps, plastic, stuff like that, ready to go. And finally, be a part of a strong local business community that's ready to help each other out. That last one, being part of a strong community, is something that we take really seriously as SES volunteers. Most of us have full-time jobs, and when severe weather happens, SES volunteers have to leave. We leave our families and our jobs to go help other people. And it's our employers, Queensland businesses, who let us do that and who support us when we're helping our community. So look, we're really grateful for the support that Queensland Business gives us, and I hope that this presentation has provided you and your business with some practical ways that you can help prepare your business this storm season.
Thanks, Travis, for taking the time to present today. It is now time for our Q&A session, so please send through your questions for Travis using text box on screen, and we will answer as many as we can in the remaining minutes. We have had a few come through already. Will the SES send their volunteers to help me clean up my business after a severe storm or flood?
Well, look, after a severe weather event, the SES goes into what we call the response phase. The focus of SES volunteers, as I said earlier, is always going to be on homes and residential properties. Commercial property isn't really our focus as much as helping people stay in their own homes. After a really bad storm, like last year's hailstorm in Brisbane, for example, the SES received literally thousands of calls for help from families in homes that have been damaged. Responding to that, our SES volunteers worked day and night for, day after day, night after night, to make the temporary repairs to those homes that allow families to keep living in their own home until permanent repairs can be made. So after a big event, after severe weather, SES is going to be focusing on residential property.
Thanks, Travis. Isn't this my landlord's responsibility? Shouldn't centre management deal with all this?
Well, it's everyone's responsibility, really. Yes, it may mean having a serious conversation with your landlord or centre management about property maintenance and things that need to be looked at before storm season. It may mean sitting down with other businesses nearby or next door to solve common problems like overhanging trees, or helping each other clean up each other's premises and yards so there's loose objects aren't there to fly around in severe weather or high winds. Insurance is something that's definitely your responsibility. Looking after your employees, that's something that's your responsibility too. And again, you can look after what's inside your business as well to be prepared. Having tarps and plastic sheeting available, that'll mean that if your building does sustain damage, you can cover stock or business equipment from leaks in the roof, or cover it from broken windows. Even if the whole roof blows off, you'll be able to use those tarps and plastic sheeting to wrap up the stuff inside your business that's important and to protect it from rain and the elements.
Thanks, Travis. I'll be away. Can I call SES to check my property after a storm? I'm happy to pay for it.
Well, I guess over Christmas and New Year, you're not alone. I think a lot of small businesses are looking forward to spending some time with their family if they can, and that might mean closing up for a week or so. And again, it's right in the middle of storm season, and I can remember quite a few occasions when Brisbane and southeast Queensland has had some really quite severe storms the week of Christmas. I've spent more than one Christmas up on a ladder in SES overalls as well, so Christmas is certainly no time to be to think that we're immune to severe weather. The SES isn't a fee-for-service organisation, so no, we really can't check on your property like that. That's something you're going to need to make your own arrangements for. One idea that might be of interest is having a duty roster of employees, of people that come into work to check on things every so often, in particular after there's been a bad storm. Again, this might be something else that you can talk to neighbours about and arrange for a neighbour to look after or keep an eye on your property while you're away, and you can look after or keep an eye on their property while they're away. At the very least, you're going to want your neighbours to have your contact details so they can get a hold of you or someone responsible for your premises and your business if something does happen from a severe storm over the break.
Thanks, Travis. Can I get sandbags from the SES at the time?
Well, the availability of sandbags is something that you're going to really want to check with your local council. I know in Brisbane, sandbags are quite often made available throughout the storm season, and Brisbane City Council does a good job in promoting the locations where they can be picked up, pre-filled, ready to go. Other local governments, again, it depends on the local government. Some offer sandbags when very severe weather is expected. These are things that are generally made publicly aware over ABC Radio is a good place to listen out for. While we're talking about sandbags too, I just want to reiterate, they're very, very heavy and tricky to deal with because they are so heavy. And loading them up into a vehicle, your vehicle really does get loaded down. You can only carry, carrying a dozen or so sandbags in the back of a ute you'll know you're carrying a load, put it that way. It takes a lot of effort to move them. It takes a lot of time to pack them properly. And again, you need to be realistic about what they can and can't do. As I said, sandbags work their best when they're diverting running water. So think about stormwater running down a driveway or floodwater that's moving. Sandbags and plastic sheeting do a pretty good job in keeping that water moving along so it doesn't get into your building. Where we get a little bit less realistic in what people expect sandbags to do are things like levee banks. You may have seen, people have seen sandbag levee banks on TV after floods and things like that. They take literally an army of people to build, and they take literally tons of sand to build. They're things that really are probably not going to be realistic for your business. And again, the SES aren't going to be available to help build that sort of levee bank outside everyone's home and outside everyone's building. So being realistic about what sandbags can do is important. Using them with plastic sheeting, I can't underline that enough. Sandbags on their own won't stop water. Water will actually move through sandbags unless you have the plastic sheeting underneath them. The presentation, there's a great link to a YouTube video from the SES talking about how sandbags can be used effectively, some great scenarios there, and also talking about how to get rid of them as well, because once sandbags have been in contact with contaminated floodwater, they oftentimes have the nasty stuff soaked into them that was running past. So they're not really something that you're going to want to have lying around after the weather has passed.
Thanks, Travis. That's all the questions we have time for today. On behalf of CCRQ, I'd like to thank Travis for taking the time to present today. I'd also like to thank everyone who has joined us for today's session. Don't forget, this webinar series consists of 5 parts, so please make sure you register at www.ccrq.com.au/storm season for the remaining webinars. Tomorrow's is Preparing Your Business for Storm Season Part 2, Business Interruption Processes with Sundata. Thanks for joining us today, and I look forward to welcoming you to another CCRQ webinar in the very near future.